Amount of questions about Dusty the dog. He certainly captured the public's imagination. Can you tell us, Rick, what was the final result of your testing on the dog that had the Hendra virus?
Well, Dusty was positive for antibodies to Hendra virus. I mean, it is one of the unfortunate things with any disease outbreaks, particularly like Hendra virus, which has a high fatality rate for horses and for humans, that animals die. And it's unfortunate if you're an animal lover, as I am and most people are, that horses die as a result of that. Dusty was tested and was positive for Hendra virus. Dusty wasn't showing any clinical signs, so he appeared quite normal. But one of the unfortunate things about Hendra virus is that it can lay dormant in an animal. And we know that from related virus like Nipah virus. It does, I think about 10% of animals that apparently get over Nipah virus recrudesce or get the disease again. We know there was a case in humans where a human had nervous signs and got over that after assisting in the post-mortem of a horse, and 13 months later that person died from Hendra virus. We suspect it lays dormant in flying foxes and potentially in horses as well. And so we can't rule out that Dusty had the disease and it could lay dormant in Dusty, then come out later. We don't know the chances of that, and it's probably not high. But it's the consequences of, if that happens, is that Hendra virus has killed 4 out of 7 people. And it's a family dog, and if that changed within that family and Dusty potentially bit somebody or had some contact with that could kill people. It could kill the owners, it could kill people as part of the family and visiting the family. And so it is a national policy because of that animals that are positive to Hendra virus and show antibodies are euthanized. And we had a discussion, a national discussion. This is a real hard policy issue for us, because any animal that's apparently normal, normally when you have antibodies it shows you've got over the disease and you're okay. But with this, it doesn't necessarily mean that. And so we did have a national meeting, discussed it at length amongst all the chief veterinary officers, and we ultimately made the decision to maintain that policy of euthanasia. We then discussed it with the owners of Dusty, and of course it was really hard for them to hear that news, but ultimately they made the decision themselves to have their vet euthanize Dusty.
Kylie, though, from Rockhampton, poses this question, though. Why wouldn't you keep Dusty the dog alive to basically learn something from him in terms of how the virus is transmitted? Or
yeah, and that would be obviously that would be the thing you'd think of straight away. This is an opportunity for us to gain some information, but again, it's like having a walking time bomb. You don't know when this might happen, and so you can't leave a potential risk with the family. And so there would be a potential then to move Dusty down to a laboratory, a confined place where you can actually do the research. But if you go down to the Australia, and the only place in Australia where we can do that is the Australian Animal Health Laboratory at Geelong, and they've got high containment. So what you're looking at is an area where people enter with spacesuits on, and so they'll be checking Dusty. Dusty will be there by himself as a family dog for the rest of its life. Just waiting there, just to see in case it may have a disease. So it's the risk to the family versus, and then if you want to keep Dusty alive, it's the animal welfare impacts on Dusty. And it's really doubtful whether an animal welfare committee, ethics committee would approve that sort of thing, because the impact on Dusty, sitting there as a lone dog for the rest of its life while it's sort of being examined, I don't think it's acceptable, and I don't think most of the community would find it's acceptable.
What about, Rick, there's a question here from Tracy in Burdekin. What are the risks of Hendra in wild dogs? Do you know?
We don't know. We don't know. We think that we don't actually know to what extent dogs can get Hendra from flying foxes. The case with Dusty was, we believe, although we don't know, it's possibly from flying foxes or possibly from horse, but we believe because mammals, because humans and other horses get it from horses, and that horses put out a lot of virus, that the most likely case in this instance is that Dusty got the infection from the horse. And so for wild dogs to get Hendra virus, they would really have to come in contact with a horse, an infected horse. Again, that is possible. We do quarantine properties that have got infections, but we can't always stop wild dogs getting there. So there is a potential risk there. We suspect it's low, but there is a risk that a wild dog could get it from a horse.
And just on the subject of dogs, cats, there were a lot of questions from cat owners about whether their cats are susceptible.
Yeah, cats are susceptible to Hendra virus. That's been tested experimentally. We've never had a case. As I said, we actually tested 2 cats this time. But one of the things about cats is they usually don't have much contact with horses. And so if you get an infected horse, the likelihood of a contact between a cat and a horse is not high. But we still test cats, and we still advise owners on infected properties, on properties where there's an infected horse, to separate their cat away from the horse, because they do have a potential risk, a higher potential risk than a dog.
Could I comment on that, Sharon? I think there's also something to be learned from the experiences with Nipah virus in Malaysia, Nipah being very closely related to Hendra virus. And there was purposely a study of cats in the village situation on Tiaman Island, where there was identified infection, Nipah virus infection in the flying foxes, and the cat populations in the village and also in a refuge were sampled, and no evidence of Hendra virus was found in that cat population, with a high exposure level, if you like. I think similarly in dogs in Malaysia, there were certainly dogs infected in the context of the outbreak of Nipah virus in pigs in Malaysia, but all those dogs were associated with pig farms rather than having been infected from flying foxes in the natural situation. And I think that our surveillance system here in Australia is so good. I mean, we have derm people, parks and wildlife people doing pig culls, particularly in the proximity of flying fox colonies as part of their management. If there were any suggestion of wild dogs being infected, and you would think logically that wild dogs in the proximity of flying fox camps would be more likely, I think we'd be aware of it, and there's no suggestion that there have been any unidentified illnesses or an increased frequency of deaths in wild dogs.